The Portfolio Composer, episode 223.
You're listening to the Portfolio Composer podcast with your host and coach, Garrett Hope, where he teaches you what it takes to master the business end of writing music through mindset, marketing, and business skills. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter at theportfoliocomposer.com for exclusive offers, business insights, and information not shared on the podcast. And now, for this episode of The Portfolio Composer.
Being an artist is not just about the creative side, but you really have to learn to be a business person. And I think that's a mistake a lot of artists make, is they forget, you can't just be spending all your time making music, which everyone would love to do, but you have to be learning the business side and doing all this, or else you're going to be wasting all of your time and effort trying to make this music if you don't know how to get it out there.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Just released, Dorico Pro 3 is a major new version with game-changing advances in note input, notation, and engraving. Also available from Steinberg is Dorico Elements, an entry-level application that packs all of the essential power of Dorico Pro into a simple, streamlined package that is ideal for those getting started. Find out more later in the show. And welcome to episode 223 of the Portfolio Composer Podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Hope, and I'm so grateful you're taking the time to listen to this show. This show is made for all creatives, those who are on their way to trying to make it in today's economy. And everything is different post-2008 recession. The jobs economy has shifted, and for a lot of creative individuals, we are now in a gig-based economy. The idea of getting a job in the creative fields and just having it for decades until you retire is long gone. Teaching positions are few and far between, and those that do exist are increasingly becoming less tenure track. And so that means we're working by contract even there, in short-term contracts. But there are ways to make a living, and that's what this show explores. It interviews primarily composers and some performers and authors and business leaders trying to answer the question, how can you make it in today's music world? What is the music business like, and what are the skills you need to have? Today's episode is really interesting. It's with a composer and performer, Jennifer Thomas, who is literally making six figures a year just on her streaming royalties alone. She increases her revenue through performance and merchandise sales and sheet music sales and licensing of her tracks. It's really quite impressive. She's built an immense business around the work she does. This is a very valuable podcast if you have any dream of all of putting your music up for streaming and hoping to make some money that way. So Jennifer is a top Billboard charting artist, an award-winning pianist, violinist, composer, performing artist, recording artist, and a Yamaha-sponsored artist. She is equally well known for her classical covers and her original compositions. Jennifer has won awards across the spectrum for her songs, albums, and film scores. She's collaborated with Grammy winners, world-famous choirs and orchestras, and her mom. When not composing or recording, she can be found at home with her husband and three boys. Enjoy this episode. The name of the podcast comes from the investment world, the portfolio composer, and that is to have a portfolio of income-producing activities.
Right.
So I want to ask you, as a composer, a performer, a pianist, a creative individual, Jennifer, what is in your portfolio right now?
So that's a really good question. I try to have a lot of different outlets for income sources other than just my main gig, which is writing music and putting out albums. And I think it's really important to talk about because I think a lot of up and coming younger college students, for example, they get streamlined into these different avenues of education and they feel really stuck. Like, this is my only road to take. I can only compose, or I can only teach, or I can only perform. And in today's world, there are so many different ways to be creative with that and make music, not just from your main source. So for me, in my portfolio right now, I have digital downloads, physical sales, royalties, sheet music sales, licensing, performance, like touring and concerts, merchandise. What else? Those are probably my biggest ones, but there's just a lot of different baskets that I've got my hand into to create that revenue coming in.
Right. So if I counted right, and I might not have, you had 5 or 6 different items on there. And what I love about it, and this is the whole idea of why I started the show, is that we can't just rely on a single income source.
Mm-hmm.
And because you have your fingers in so many pies, as you put it, when one ebbs and flows, or if one goes away entirely, you're not stuck in a bad situation.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to put everything into one basket, like you said. You've got to have all these different residual incomes coming in that actually make money on their own without you having to work at it.
So as you built your portfolio and your career, did you plan this out, or did you just kind of stumble across and be like, oh, yeah, they want this. I'll create that and sell that to them too. And oh, yeah, I can do this too. How did that work for you?
Yeah, I think it's been a combination of things just accidentally happening and also fans asking for certain things. For example, when I first started out my career, I didn't release my sheet music sales because I was really afraid of letting that go. I felt like it was very personal. And if I let that go, then I don't even know if I'm making sense, but letting that out into the world where I knew people would start playing it in public concerts and they had access to that and people could record it was very terrifying for me. So it took me a while to actually do that, but that was something the fans were requesting. And I eventually started releasing my sheet music, and I do that all of the time now. And it's been a really huge money maker. It's one of those residual incomes that just keeps coming in. And it's a lot of hard work to get the transcriptions done and the sheet music published and books and all of that. But it's like a one-time thing. So once I get all the work done and I have it available, it works all by itself and it's finished and it just keeps making money.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
So that's what we call passive income, which is ideal, right?
Yeah.
So have you set up a web store too? And are you running that? Or are you going through a third party?
Yeah, I have a web store on my site and I sell all of my sheet music there. The only other source that does sell my sheet music is musicnotes.com. And they have a good catalog of my music. They don't have everything, but I do sell everything from my site.
Sure. Well, one of the ways I first encountered your music was on Spotify. And in conversation that you and I have had via email long before we got on the call today, was how you said you're literally paying your mortgage through your streaming royalties.
Yeah.
And this seems to fly in the face of the common understanding of how much artists are getting made or how much artists are getting paid online. So I'd really like to dig into that. Tell us more about how you're making that work and how you set it up.
Well, how I set it up is pretty easy. It's the same for most artists. You have a distributor who puts the music on the streaming sources for you, like Spotify and Pandora and Tidal and other things. And I go through these distributors to get the payment from the streaming services. But it all started mostly for me back in 2007 with my first album, Key of C. It got on Pandora and it just really started taking off from there. That was actually becoming my fastest resource for new people to hear my music. That's where they were discovering me. It just kind of caught on. And over the years, I've gotten to a place of becoming one of Pandora's top 1% streamed artists out of everyone, out of all of the genres. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, okay, well, let's take a step back. I know I kind of threw you this huge question. Are you on a label or are you doing this all independently?
I'm independent here in the US. I'm on a Japanese label in Asia, but everywhere else I'm independent.
And most of the time you're classified as crossover classical. Is that accurate?
Yeah, classical crossover.
What does that mean?
It's basically a crossover of genres between classical and whatever else you want to call it, either pop or, for my music example, it crosses over into the cinematic world. So not so much pop, but more music that sounds like film soundtracks. But I have a lot of classical elements in it. I'm classically trained, and so I use a lot of, I have Beethoven and Mozart and Bach and all kinds of other aspects in my music as well.
Sure, I definitely can hear that. Now, I am classically trained as well. In fact, I even have a doctorate in composition. And
wow.
Most of the listeners of the podcast come from that conservatory mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And there is major pushback, or really, I should say, a thumbing the nose at the idea of the classical crossover.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
How have you dealt with that?
That is you hit a really sore spot for me with that question, actually, because I've dealt with that very issue for so many years.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I went on tour this past summer. I had a 20-city tour. And during my tour, this really awesome article came out in the media in one of my bigger cities for one of my shows. And it was a really great positive article. And at the time, you were probably familiar with Classic FM over in the UK.
Yes.
They took the article and basically turned it around into this negative clickbaitish article. And the kickback from their classical fans and listeners was huge, and not in a good way. It was very negative. And it was really tough to go through because I am a crossover artist, and coming from a classical world, I get that world. I mean, I've performed concertos with symphonies. I know exactly that world. But to actually deal with it head on and hear face to face the negative comments and just how they were perceiving my style of music was really hard. But at the same time, I came out of that whole situation feeling so much more confident in my artistry, because it kind of helped me to know where I fit in with my music more.
Huh.
And it was actually really helpful. And it just gave me a lot of confidence going forward to know that my music really does resonate more in a cinematic world, even though it has classical influences. So that was really helpful for me, because I've struggled with that in between genre thing for so many years. But yeah, I could talk so much about this subject, but yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about it. To me, it seems like you've just found a really good job of marrying your personal interests and likes and finding a niche and an audience that wants what you can deliver. And to me, those are the basic marketing principles. Did you stumble into this, or did you start with the intent of kind of being in that niche?
No, honestly, I wanted to write the kind of music that I would want to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And I love listening to film scores and movie music, but I also love classical music. And so with the training that I've had and the technical skills, I just, like you said, I put them together, and I wanted to create music that had the technical skills of a classical genre, but also had the epic sound of a movie soundtrack. It's been hard because my genre is it's not like there's a lot of artists doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. And so over the years, I have had a lot of other industry people say oh, you would fit in so much more if you got rid of the orchestra and just did solo piano, or, just all kinds of ideas of how to change. But I haven't wanted to do anything other than what I've always set out to do and what I love. And it's paid off, because I now have a lot of those same people coming to me asking me to orchestrate their music, or they're trying to do something similar to what I've been able to do with my genre. So I don't know. I just think that, you should definitely, just advice to artists out there, stick with what you love and do it exactly what you want to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's great. And it kind of affirms what you're doing, right? When you have those people then coming back to you.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So let's circle back around to the streaming thing. You are releasing these in the US as an independent artist. What third party are you using that puts it out onto the platforms?
I've been with CD Baby for 12 years now.
Okay.
So they are my distributor, and they're the ones who gets it out there for me.
And then they also can provide physical copies of the discs if someone wants them.
Right. Yeah. And I believe they're also in partnership with Amazon. So they deliver a lot of my CDs to Amazon as well.
Okay. Now, when you say you're literally paying the bills through your streaming royalties, I'm assuming you're talking several $1,000s a month minimum in royalties. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it makes up about 50% of my income, and just the streaming alone is a 6-figure income a year.
Wow. Congratulations. For one, that's amazing. We all want to be there as composers.
Thanks.
What was the tipping point that got you there? How many albums did you have to have on there, and how large was your audience, if you have any idea, before you reached that momentum that you currently have?
Well, it definitely didn't happen overnight. Hold on, let me actually think about this. It was probably 4 years after I released my first album. I really didn't even know the impact that streaming was having at that time. So this was probably 2011. And I got an email from Sound Exchange. They're the service that collects streaming royalties from the streaming services. And they said, hey, you have some money sitting in an account that you haven't collected. Can we send it to you? And I'm like, oh, this is probably one of those fake emails where they're trying to send me money from some strange country or something. But it turns out that it was legitimate, and they had $10,000 in an account that was unclaimed by me. And at the time, I had just started my career, and $10,000 was a lot of money, and I was ecstatic. In fact, it helped pay for my first grand piano that I bought at the time. And then from there, it seemed every year it would just double or triple, and it kept growing with each album release. My most popular album was released in 2012. It's called Illumination. And that's really the one, once that one was released, it just kind of exploded after that, to the point where we started realizing I was earning more than my husband at his job. And we decided that he would just retire from his job, and we would just together work on my music career after that. So It's been a slow process. I mean, this has been 12 years of working on music and releasing albums, but it was probably like 6 of those years before it started to finally, actually make good money.
Oh man, that's great. Okay. So I have a couple reactions to this. The first is that there are going to be some composers who are doing more avant-garde. They're still not interested in doing classical crossover stuff at all.
Right.
And they're probably thinking, there's no way I can make money doing this very, very niched thing that I do. In what ways are those people wrong? Can you, no matter what kind of music you make, can you find some income by being on the streaming services?
I would say not exactly.
Okay.
I definitely think that, for example, if you're a pop singer and you're doing very pop vocal work, you're probably not going to make much on streaming because it's so competitive. It's a huge genre of music, and especially if you're independent, there's no way you're going to be able to compete with like Taylor Swift, for example. It's just probably not going to happen. But if you're actually in a very niche genre where you're not having to compete against a lot of other bigger artists, you might actually do well. For example, even though I'm not a solo piano artist, last year I was interviewed along with 5 other solo pianists from Rolling Stone magazine. They did a feature on, I don't like the title of the article that they called it, but the title of the article was The Lucrative Inside Secret World of Solo Piano Music. And they talked exactly about this. They talked about what a huge moneymaker solo pianists are making from streaming. And one of the biggest questions they asked was, why is that? And the answer to that is because it's still a small enough genre where you can rise to the top and you don't have a lot of the competition that you would with other genres. And also a lot of us artists that are doing this style of music, we own all of our music. We're not with these labels that are taking, all of the profits and splitting it 50 different ways. And that's also a different factor.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're right. And this is how I counsel and coach composers, is to find that niche where you become the best source for the people who are looking for what you want to deliver. Of course, you have to start with the music you love, like you did, right?
Right.
You can't backwards engineer it, or you're just kind of pandering to the crowd. But once you start doing what you do, you can find the people who are already interested.
Yeah. And they say, to have success with what you're doing, you don't have to have 100 million fans.
No.
You just need like 1,000 really good fans that support you. And
Kevin Kelly's famous article, 1,000 True Fans. Yep.
Oh, really? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so true. And, I look at another good crossover artist. She's different than me, but Lindsey Stirling is another instrumental artist. Mm-hmm. She does more electronica. She's the same thing. She started out doing something very unique and very different that no one else was doing. And a lot of people were really resistant to it when she first started, but now she's hugely popular. And I think she was in Forbes top 40 under 40 or something like that. I mean, she's a millionaire now doing exactly what she started out doing, but it's just that no one else was doing it. And she was smart and unique, and she made a career off of it.
Yeah. And that's another one. I mean, she is wildly successful, and some of her tunes are really cool that the classical world looks down upon.
Exactly.
How dare you dance on the stage with your violin while playing pop crossover hits?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Then there's the piano guys, right? They're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. They're another example. I actually know them and I'm friends with them. And they started out on YouTube making these amazing, unique videos that no one else was doing, putting pianos in unique places. And yeah, they took off from there as well.
This episode is sponsored by Dorico, the future of scoring. And we want to feature real Dorico users so you can know that real composers out in the world today are using Dorico to make their careers happen.
My name is Rode Gustafsson, and I am a publisher with my company Recapo Edition. I was one of the first to buy Dorico. I was watching the release on YouTube, and I think it was within a couple of hours I bought Dorico. I have no regrets whatsoever. I bought it and I never looked back. It's my dream program. I am really a fan of the engrave mode and with the master pages and how the philosophy of music frames and text frames that you can combine both music and text on the setup that you want. And that's a very important feature for me as a publisher. My workflow has improved a lot. And it sounds nerdy, but it's a joy to work in the program. As soon as you open the program, you say, yes, now I want to create some good music. I think it's a big competitor. There are some features that is not included yet, but I can work 100% of my time in Dorico. And if there is something that I need to do that Dorico doesn't have, I can always do it graphically. I just have to give my congratulations to the team. I am a part of the Facebook group. The Dorico has its own group. The community around it, it's such full of love. And if I have any question, or if the community has any, you just go to Facebook and write, hi, can you do this? Or I can't really find this feature. And almost immediately someone is writing back an answer. I would absolutely recommend Dorico to everybody. I already do that to my colleagues and fellow musicians, and to those who are not sure whether they are the right fits for Dorico. I always say, try to download. It's free for 1 month. Just go ahead, write in some music, and I'm convinced that you won't regret it. It will improve the quality of your music, especially if you're a composer. The output, the raw output, when you just put in the music without editing, it looks beautiful right from the start.
The kind folks at Dorico have set up a special web page so you can go and download a free 30-day trial copy of Dorico. So go and do that. I have been using the program and I'm absolutely in love with it. Go to dorico.com/TPC. All right, so you were talking about how you're making 6 figures a year through your streaming income. Mm-hmm. But the common wisdom is that artists are receiving like 1,000th of a penny per stream, like minuscule, and it takes millions of streams to even buy supper for yourself. Yet you're flying in the face of that common understanding. What are the real numbers here? What can an artist make if you're independently releasing your stuff?
First of all of that is such a fallacy because they put out these media articles and they put these streaming services in a really bad light. And they always highlight these really big pop stars that are with a record label. And of course, they're not going to make very much because they're on a label. I mean, I'm on a label in Asia and I know the different splits of where the money goes. And it's a lot of different people they have to share their royalties with. So when they spout out these figures in these media articles and they say, oh, so-and-so only made $1,000 from a million streams. I mean, obviously, but they forget to highlight the independent artist who's actually owning 100% of their work and not doing too shabby. So the real numbers, Spotify is changing all the time depending on how many people are listening, but I can give you more concrete numbers from Pandora. And Pandora has, I believe they have currently three different listing tiers. I don't think a lot of people actually realize that. So they have like a free service, and then they have a paid service, and then they have an on-demand streaming service that you can tell it exactly what you want to listen to, a lot like Spotify. And so I get paid a different rate depending on what people are listening to. So if they're listening to the free service, it's 0.017 a seventh of a cent. So 0.17 of a cent per stream. And then it goes up to 0.022 for the highest one. And the other one is somewhere in between. I think it's 0.021. But you see a lot of media articles that come out that are extremely outdated, and they're saying, oh, Pandora is only paying 0.013 or something. And they've gone up quite a lot. And also a lot of great things have happened in this past year. Songwriting royalties have gone up. There's a lot of good things happening, but it just doesn't always get portrayed positively in the media.
So it's also an economy of scale then, because if you're going to get 0.02 of a cent per stream, then you actually have to have many thousands of streams, hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And so what have you done? I'm curious, if anything, to help increase that?
It's definitely getting harder these days because I think artists are finally catching on. Oh, wow, I can make money from streaming. And so, for example, Spotify, like right now, the biggest thing on Spotify is getting on curated Spotify playlists. And if you could get, for example, just one song on one of these playlists that have, hundreds of thousands of listeners, then boom, you can get a lot of streams on one song overnight. And I know artists that they treat it like a full-time job trying to get their music on these various playlists. That's a huge other thing. It's part of the whole marketing your music that artists nowadays have to do, is trying to get their music on these playlists. For Pandora, it's different because they don't do curated playlists like Spotify does. I actually love Pandora's platform. They're all about the algorithms. And so I constantly am trying to encourage my fans to thumbs up my music. And in fact, Pandora allows me to leave little artist messages on my station. So for example, if someone hears my song, I can leave a little message that they'll hear after the song that says, hey, this is Jennifer Thomas, and you just heard my new song. If you loved it, please give it a thumbs up. And that actually has helped my streaming algorithms a lot. And Pandora will take notice of songs of mine that are getting a lot of thumbs up, and they'll start playing them more often. So there's just all these little things that you can do on both Spotify with the curated playlists and Pandora and artist messages, just really trying to interact and get the fans to like your music more so that they get that feedback. And that also boosts your streaming numbers.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of that information in the past. I interviewed someone, I should have looked this up, but a long time ago. They were part of a PR firm, and what they specialize in is helping promote the music to these playlists.
Yeah.
Because it's about knowing the right people and asking at the right time, and obviously having good music. But getting into the playlist is really a critical component of making money on streaming.
Yeah, it is. And it's really hard to do. I mean, even with my music, we've spent a lot of time trying to email, especially because my genre is very difficult sometimes. But to get on certain playlists, it's, like I said, it's like a full-time job just trying to contact these people. And you can put in requests and you can apply for playlists. There's just a lot out there. It can become overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure. What has been the biggest surprise for you as this career has blossomed and now you've got all this passive income and you're in this upward trajectory that looks fantastic? What have you learned that really set you back? Like, wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Well, honestly, like I said, when my husband quit his job back in 2015, I never, ever would have thought my career would have gotten to the point where he would be able to do that and we could just do music. And I mean, most artists, the reality out there is most artists are working a normal job and then the music ends up being their side income. So I never imagined that one day, my music would be making six figures, supporting our family, paying our mortgage. And that was our job, So I would say in the big picture of things, that was definitely the biggest surprise.
Tell me a little bit more about having your husband work for you, for the business of Jennifer Thomas Music, or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Running the music business is big, right? There's the writing, there's the recording, there's the producing, then there's the marketing and everything. So how have you and your husband kind of divvied up these responsibilities, and what is he taking care of?
Well, like the biggest thing, like you said, being an artist is not just about the creative side, but you really have to learn to be a business person. And I think that's a mistake a lot of artists make, is they forget, like, you can't just be spending all your time making music, which everyone would love to do, but you have to be learning the business side and doing all this, or else you're going to be wasting all of your time and effort trying to make this music if you don't know how to get it out there. So with that being said, my husband, he basically tries to take any load off of me that he can that stresses me out. So, for example, he has a master's degree in finance and real estate. So he's really good with numbers and stats. So anything that is related to like the money side of things, I hate dealing with it. Like if I get emails from people asking to use my music for a film and they want to know numbers and how much to license it for, that's just conversations that stress me out. So any kind of money related stuff, I just forward on to him and he takes care of that for me. He also does take care of a lot of the streaming marketing stuff. So he's the one contacting playlists and spending a lot of time doing that stuff, which takes a load off of me so that I can concentrate on being creative. And then when we are touring and doing concerts and stuff, he's kind of a roadie for me. So he's kind of a man of many hats. He does a lot of different things, but basically his goal is to take anything off of my plate that is just too stressful so that I can concentrate on music more.
Well, kudos to your husband. I laughed a little bit when you said he was a man who wears many hats, because to me, that's just the creative life.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. You're doing so many different things, from, like shipping your own CDs out, and the next day you're like performing in a concert hall. So yeah.
Obviously, you made the decision for your husband to join you in this business when your income crossed a threshold. But with his efforts now, and both of you are working probably more than full time on this, how has that magnified what you've been able to do? So for instance, if you were driving, like street speeds, like 30 miles an hour by yourself, and now with him in the business, how fast can you go?
Yeah, it's been a huge difference. I mean, to put it in perspective, right before we decided to take that leap, I was in a position that many artists are. You get to that place where you're working the full-time job and your music is on the side, and you want to do the music full-time, but you're scared to do it because the full-time job is very stable and it's an income that's constantly coming in. And you have that question of, if I take a leap of faith and do my music, am I just basically going to be a poor, starving artist? And I was at that point a few years before we decided to make that transition, where I was teaching about 30 students in my studio, and I was making a good teaching income, but I had no time to work on my music. Like, I would have to hire a nanny one day a week for an 8-hour day to watch my kids so that I could be in my studio for one day. I remember doing a film score when I was 9 months pregnant, and it was like torture because I was about to have a baby, but I had this film score that was due and I was up late nights trying to work on that. And then I was teaching, and it was really hard. But when we finally decided to put all of our eggs into the music basket and just really concentrate on that, and I quit teaching and I decided to go for my music career full time, everything just took off from there. And I feel like once you finally get to that point where you are ready to put everything into it, and I mean everything, because it takes a lot of work. I work like 12 to 14 hours a day on my music still. I think that when you create the space in your life to declutter all this other stuff and actually concentrate on it, then it can really take off. And that's what it did for me.
That takes a big leap of faith.
It does, for sure.
I encounter that, personally, but I see it with the composers I work with a lot. I mean, composers are not taught money. Creative people are not. And rightly so, we go to school to learn how to be more creative and to do what we do, making music. But there's a lot of fear in taking that leap and saying, okay, I'm not going to have a stable income moving forward.
Yeah.
And, what kinds of things did you have to say to yourself to get the courage to make that leap?
Well, I looked at it as time. Time was money for me. And, a lot of my time was being stolen from me by the hours of doing all these things that wasn't making me happy. Even though I loved my students, teaching music did not make me necessarily happy, in the sense that that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life with my music career. So for me, it was telling myself that the time I was creating for myself to work on my music was going to make me happier. And it was an investment, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Because time is money. The more time you put into something, the effort you put into whatever you're spending your time on is where you're going to create your success or not.
Yes, I agree so much. I'm so glad you said that. I'm like jumping out of my chair because I agree with you 100%, especially the investment part.
Yeah.
We want to have our careers just kind of happen and then kind of emerge out of being able to work 5 hours a week between jobs. And yet you can only reach so far. Like you've said, to scale it up, you have to really go in.
Yeah.
And it's an investment.
Yeah.
Wow. I just thank you so much for saying that. All right.
You're so welcome.
One question I really like asking the guests on the show is if you could give one actionable piece of advice to the people who are listening today. So for those people who are listening, what's one thing you would recommend they do that could move their career forward? And that could be just career-wise in general, or it could be specific to streaming and income generation, however you want to take it.
I would say that the biggest advice I could say is just take one day at a time. And I know that we're all busy and we have busy lives and so much going on, but if you can learn to prioritize and manage your time better, even if it's just 1 hour a day to work on marketing your music, or 1 hour a day to doing that thing that's going to propel you forward more in your career, then that is going to help you. And that's going to make a huge difference, because 1 hour a day ends up being 7 hours a week, and it adds up and it helps. But if you just get overwhelmed and decide you just can't do it because you don't have the time for it, it's never going to happen for you. So prioritizing your time, even if it's a little bit of time, is so important.
Yeah.
It's probably my biggest advice.
I love it. It's been great.
Thank you.
Well, Jennifer, I want to respect your time and I don't want to hold you too long. I'm really grateful for you joining me on the podcast and making yourself available. And for those listening, Jennifer and I have scheduled this interview multiple times, and it's been kind of a journey to get here, but I've really enjoyed this conversation and I learned a lot about the streaming and how you can actually make it.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I'm glad we had this chat.
Yeah. Well, kudos to your career. And one of the things you said in our email is that you're promoting your album for Grammy consideration. So I hope that pans out for you. If not now, that soon in the future.
Thank you so much, Garrett. I really appreciate that. And I've really enjoyed talking with you.
This episode of The Portfolio Composer has been supported by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Whether you're a composer or arranger, a teacher or student, working in music engraving and publishing, or working in producing music for media such as film, TV, and games, Dorico is the tool for you. Dorico comes in two versions: Dorico Pro for professionals and Dorico Elements, providing the perfect introduction to the world of scoring. Whichever version you choose, you'll be using software packed full of smart features that produces beautiful results completely automatically, allowing you to get music on the stand more quickly than with any other software. You can bring music into Dorico from your existing software using Music XML or MIDI, and you can try Dorico out completely free of charge for 30 days by downloading a trial version from dorico.com/TPC. Try it today.